Hello everyone, I'm really glad you're here. Tonight, I want to help you let go of the day and ease into rest. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, and it means a lot to be part of your nightly routine. So, if you haven't already, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It truly helps. Now, settle in, close your eyes, and let's begin. Story 1. The Forgotten Shed. When I was a kid, my parents used to take us to visit my grandfather's property out in rural Missouri. He owned a wide stretch of wooded land dotted with rusted cars, broken down sheds, and the crumbling remains of old barns that had long surrendered to time. As children, my siblings and I thought of it as an adventure, a wild playground where nature and decay held hands. But there was one part of the property we were told never to go near a shed. Not too far from the edge of the woods, surrounded by tangled vines and leaning slightly to one side, it looked ordinary enough, just another forgotten structure in a sea of forgotten things. But my grandfather was clear. "Stay out of that shed," he said. "No one goes in there." He never explained why, and as children we obeyed. Most of the time. One autumn afternoon, curiosity got the best of me. My cousins were visiting and we were bored. We played in the woods until the leaves turned gold beneath our feet, and then someone brought up the shed, the forbidden place. We dared each other to go look. Just a peek, we promised. We approached it together, laughing nervously. The air around it felt strangely heavy, like the world had stopped just outside its walls. The door was ajar, hanging crooked on rusted hinges. I was the one who stepped in first. The smell hit me immediately, damp, musty, like wet earth and something faintly metallic. The light through the slats was thin and pale. Inside there were shelves full of jars, all sealed, filled with strange things. Some held what looked like animal bones. Others held cloudy liquid. One jar had what looked like a shriveled hand. We didn't stay long. A thud upstairs, yes, upstairs, though none of us had known the shed even had a second level, sent us running. We never spoke of it again. Years passed. The property was sold off, the woods were cut back, and the buildings were demolished one by one. I forgot about the shed until I was in my late 20s, visiting my father in the hospital. We talked about all kinds of things, memories, childhood, Somehow, that shed came up. I laughed, asked him if he remembered how weird it was, but he didn't laugh. His face changed, drained of colour. He looked at me and said, "You didn't go inside, did you?" I told him we had, briefly, just once. He didn't say much after that, just stared at the floor, his fingers twisting in the blanket like he was gripping something invisible. He passed away 2 days later. It was sudden, unexpected. I was devastated. While going through his things, I found an old leather-bound notebook. Inside were pages of notes, entries about my grandfather's land, about the shed. Some entries were scribbled frantically. One page read, "Don't disturb the sleeping ones." Another had a sketch of the inside of the shed, complete with a staircase I had never seen, and there was a name. Repeated, scrawled in the margins, over and over. Altha. I showed it to my uncle. He paled. Told me Altha was a cousin who disappeared as a child, that she vanished near the shed. They never found her. My grandfather never talked about it. The family just moved on. I felt something twist in my gut. Something heavy, familiar. The memory of that single thud, overhead, all those years ago. Obsession settled in. I couldn't stop thinking about it, about the jars, about the second level, about what I might have seen if I'd gone further. I began researching the property, looking up old county records. I found blueprints showing a root cellar beneath the shed. That detail had been lost over time, buried in paperwork and dust. But it was there, a hidden door under the floorboards. I contacted the new owners of the land. They were polite, confused, said the shed had collapsed long ago and the area had since been filled in. But the way they said it, the hesitation in their voices, made me wonder if they had seen something too, or felt it. The weight of forgotten things pressing in from just beyond sight. Eventually I made peace with the fact that I'd never know the full truth. But sometimes I still dream about that shed. I see it clearly, untouched by time. The door creaks open and the stairs beckon upward into shadows. I climb, slowly, always afraid but unable to stop. When I reach the second floor, there's always something waiting. Sometimes it's a chair, sometimes it's the jar with the shriveled hand, but sometimes it's a girl, pale, unmoving, eyes wide open. Her name is Alpha. And in the dream, she always turns her head to look at me, like she's been waiting, like she knows I came back too late. I wake up sweating, heart racing, and every time I do, I hear that same sound echoing in the back of my mind, the thud. Over the years, I've told a few people about the shed. Most shrug it off as a creepy childhood memory. Others lean in, fascinated, asking for details. But no one really understands the weight of it. Not even me. I still wonder what my grandfather was protecting us from. What he had seen. What secrets he buried in jars and in silence. Some nights, I take out the notebook and run my fingers over the ink. I read the name again, Alpha, and I feel like she's still there, trapped in that moment in that place, preserved like those things in the jars, forgotten but not gone, a part of the land, a part of the silence that falls over old places when everyone stops asking questions. I don't think I'll ever go back. Even if the shed was still standing, I wouldn't step inside. But the memory of it follows me. The sound of leaves crunching underfoot, the sharp smell of rust and rot, the way sunlight turned everything gold before sinking into the shadows. It's all still with me. I carry it like a secret, like a warning. Some places aren't meant to be understood. Some doors aren't meant to be opened, and some names, once spoken, never truly fade. Story 2. The Stranger in the Motel Mirror. A few years ago I went on a solo road trip through the southern part of the country. I was at a strange point in my life, tired, untethered, and searching for something I couldn't quite name. I wasn't running from anything, exactly, but I wasn't chasing anything either, just drifting. I stayed in small towns, old motels, the kinds of places with buzzing neon signs and room keys still attached to plastic tags. There was something about their quiet decay that matched the way I felt. One evening, just as the sky began to melt into that deep purple haze before full darkness, I pulled into a roadside motel in Texas. The sign blinked weakly. The lot was mostly empty. I checked in, got a key to room 7, and carried my bag down the cracked sidewalk. I didn't expect much, just a night of sleep and silence, but I would get neither. The room was small, musty, with a humming air conditioner and a lingering scent of cigarettes long past. The walls were stained yellow with age, and the carpet squished faintly underfoot, but it was clean enough. I unpacked, ordered some fast food, and settled in for the night. There was a large mirror above the dresser opposite the bed, the kind of mirror that stretched the width of the wall and was screwed directly into it, too big and heavy to move. I didn't think much of it, until I saw something strange. As I walked past it to retrieve my food from the door, I noticed something odd in my reflection. My room looked the same bed, same flickering lamp, but there was a figure standing at the far corner, still watching. I turned round quickly. Nothing. The corner was empty. I stared at it for a long time, my heart suddenly louder in my chest. Then I looked back into the mirror, The figure was still there. Tall, dark, blurred at the edges like it wasn't quite real. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. Still there. I turned back around again. Still nothing behind me. I walked over to the corner, ran my hand through the air, even looked for a shadow on the wall. Nothing. But when I stepped back to the center of the room and looked again into the mirror, the figure had moved. Closer now, just a few feet behind my reflection. My breath caught in my throat. I turned one more time, heart racing, but again, the room was empty. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was stress, bad lighting, maybe even some weird play of shadows. I sat on the bed and ate my food, trying not to look at the mirror, but I couldn't help it. Every glance confirmed the same thing. The figure was still there, and it was watching me. It didn't move again, didn't flinch or shift, just stood endlessly patient, like it was waiting for something. Eventually I turned off the lights and crawled under the covers, exhausted and unnerved. I slept with my back to the mirror, eyes fixed on the door, every muscle tense. I must have drifted off, because the next thing I remember is waking suddenly, without sound, without cause. Just that cold sensation you get when something isn't right. The room was dark, but my eyes had adjusted enough to see the faint outline of the furniture. Everything was still, except the mirror. It reflected something impossible. The figure was now sitting on the edge of the bed, right where my feet were. My blood ran cold. I dared not move. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just watched. Slowly, the figure leaned forward, its head tilting as if listening for something. Its face was still indistinct, no features I could name, but it radiated something. Ancient. Familiar. Then, in the mirror, I saw its hand rise. Not quickly. Gently, like it was reaching for me. In real life, there was no pressure, no sound, but in the mirror the fingers stretched toward my chest. I bolted upright and flicked on the light. The mirror showed only me, wide-eyed and breathless, hair clinging to my forehead in sweat. The figure was gone, vanished. I didn't sleep again. I sat upright until morning, every lamp in the room turned on, television buzzing quietly to fill the silence. When the sun rose, I packed my things and left. I told the front desk nothing. What would I even say? That their mirror showed ghosts? That I'd watched something that wasn't real try to touch me in the night? I drove for hours, trying to leave the memory behind, but I kept checking my rearview mirror, not for cars, but for him. The man who only lived in reflection. That night, I stayed at a different motel, newer, brighter, with no large mirrors in the room. I inspected every corner, even turned the TV to face the mirror on the closet door, just in case. I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. It didn't feel like a dream. It didn't feel like imagination. It felt like something had found me, or maybe recognized me. That idea chilled me more than anything. That this thing, whatever it was, knew me, or had been waiting. Days passed. I resumed my travels, but the image stayed, burned behind my eyes like a flashbulb in the dark. I avoided mirrors when I could, glanced quickly when I couldn't, but I still felt watched. I began reading about folklore, spirits in mirrors, old world legends about reflections as portals, as traps, as thresholds to something else. I didn't want to believe in it, but I also couldn't explain what I'd seen. Some people said mirrors remember, that they reflect not just us, but what stands behind us, or what once did, or what wants to again. I threw away the shirt I wore that night. I stopped sleeping in motels. I even covered the mirrors in my own house with sheets for a while. told myself I was being silly, that it was just a story, but part of me knew better. Some places aren't haunted, some objects are, and I think that mirror, room 7, was one of them. Now, years later, I still avoid certain hotels. I still check every room when I travel. I still keep a nightlight near my bed, and every once in a while when I'm tired and pass a mirror at just the right angle, I think I see movement, a flicker, a shape, and I tell myself it's nothing, just the trick of the light. But deep down, I remember that motel room. I remember that figure, and I know that somewhere out there, maybe still waiting in some forgotten roadside inn, there's a mirror, and in that mirror, he's still there, silent, still, and watching, waiting for the next person who forgets to look away. Story 3. The Woman in the Cornfield. I was 18 when I first met Sarah. She had a voice like wind through trees, soft, almost brittle, but when she spoke you listened. We met during a summer volunteer program helping clear out rural properties after a bad storm had passed through a farming region in the Midwest. Most of the time we were just cleaning debris or hauling broken fences off abandoned fields. But that day we were assigned to a stretch of farmland that hadn't been touched in decades. The cornfield was still thick, tall, reaching up like yellowed hands trying to clutch the sky, and even though it was abandoned, it seemed to breathe. We worked side by side, dragging out old tools and forgotten crates, trying to keep conversation going under the heavy sun. That was the first time she told me the story. Sarah said the cornfield was cursed. She said a woman had gone missing there during harvest season 10 years earlier. A local woman, quiet, polite, known to walk the edge of the field just after sundown. One evening, she never came home. Her husband searched, the police followed, and search parties combed through the stalks for days. They never found a body, just her scarf, knotted in the center of the field, tied around a broken ear of corn like a forgotten offering. The townspeople chalked it up to a runaway or an animal attack, but the old farmers whispered something else, that she never left the field, that she became part of it, that if you wandered deep enough, you'd hear her humming. At first, I thought Sarah was teasing me, but the way she told the story, quietly, with no hint of drama, made my skin prickle. She wasn't trying to scare me. She was just sharing something true. Later that afternoon, I wandered off to find a shaded spot and get a drink. The field was too big and I needed a break. I stepped between 2 long rows of corn, thinking I'd only go in a few paces. But the further I walked, the quieter everything became. The wind dropped off. The insects stopped buzzing. Even my own footsteps seemed muffled. That's when I heard it. A low, steady hum, like someone singing just out of sight. It didn't rise or fall, it stayed level, like the tone of someone rocking in a chair. I stood, frozen, unable to decide if I was dreaming or just overheated. The humming grew a little louder. Though it never changed in pitch, I turned around, only to find that I couldn't see the exit anymore. The rows of corn were too tall, too tight. I was completely surrounded. I called out for Sarah. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. I thought about running, but something inside told me not to move too fast. Like if I made the wrong noise, something would notice. I stood completely still and listened. The humming continued for another 30 seconds, then stopped. Just like that. Silence fell over everything. The wind picked up, blowing through the stalks in a way that made them rattle like bones. And then I saw her. She was standing 3 rows over, facing away. Her hair was long, dark, tangled with bits of husk and leaf. She wore a dress that looked like it had once been white but was now yellowed with age. I called out, thinking maybe she was hurt or lost. She didn't move. I stepped forward, gently pushing the corn aside. She still didn't react. I was just a few feet away when she suddenly turned around, and I swear her eyes were completely white and no pupils. No irises, just pale, foggy spheres staring straight through me. Her mouth opened slightly, and I heard the humming again, only now it was coming directly from her throat. No movement, just that sound, vibrating in the air. I stumbled back, nearly falling over the thick roots beneath my feet. I turned and ran, not caring which direction, just pushing through row after row, my arms scratched and stinging. Eventually I broke through to the edge of the field. Sarah was there, waiting, eyes wide. She didn't ask what happened. She just said, "You saw her, didn't you?" I nodded. She looked down and whispered, "I did too. Last year, we never talked about it again. Not during the program, not in the months that followed. But something changed between us after that. A quiet understanding. We had both seen something that didn't belong to the world outside the core." A few years later, I went back. Not for closure, not for answers. Just because I couldn't stop thinking about it. The field was still there, though the land was different. The rows had grown wilder, less orderly. I stepped inside, just a few feet, listened. The wind was calm, the silence deep. No humming, no woman, just the memory, still sharp like the edge of a page. I left quickly. I didn't want to push my luck. Some stories are meant to remain unfinished. Some truths live best in whispers, and some places, once they've seen you, don't forget. Even now, every time I drive past fields of corn in late summer, I feel that same chill. I roll up the windows. I don't make eye contact with the stalks. And if I hear a sound, even faint, even distant, I don't follow it. I keep driving. Because part of me still believes she's in there. Not angry, not malicious, just waiting. Like the field itself breathes through her. Like she's become part of something older than fear, something we're not meant to see and live to tell. And yet here I am, still remembering, still listening, still wondering if that hum will ever find its way back to me. Story 4. The Knock from the Woods. When I was 13, my family lived in a quiet house that bordered a stretch of thick woods in the Appalachian region. We weren't completely isolated. There were neighbors a few acres away, but the trees wrapped around the back of our house like a wall, and at night the forest swallowed everything. You'd hear things out there. The rustling of deer, the hoot of owls, the occasional crack of twigs, but mostly it was silence, dense and humming. My room faced the woods, and sometimes I'd fall asleep with the window cracked open, just to feel the breeze. It felt like living next to something ancient and breathing. But that changed one night in early autumn, when something in those woods began knocking on our walls. It started as a single knock, 3 sharp raps on the back of the house just past midnight. I assumed it was the wind, or maybe an animal, but it kept happening, always the same, 3 knocks right against the siding, like someone was standing there, waiting. It moved. One night it was by my bedroom, the next the kitchen wall, then the basement window. We called the police. They came, found nothing, suggested raccoons, but we knew it wasn't that. These knocks weren't frantic or random. They were deliberate, rhythmic, as if something or someone was testing the walls, listening, trying to decide where to come in. One evening my father decided to wait up, shotgun across his lap, determined to catch whoever was playing games. Nothing happened, no knocks, no movement. But the moment he went to bed, the knocking returned, this time louder, faster, angry. I woke up in a cold sweat, heart pounding. I crept to my window and looked out. The woods were darker than usual, like the night itself had thickened. Then I saw it, a shape at the edge of the trees, tall, impossibly thin, with limbs that bent wrong. It didn't move like a person. It didn't move like anything I'd ever seen. It just stood there, half in shadow, head tilted slightly, as if listening. Then it raised one long arm and knocked on a nearby tree 3 times. I screamed. My dad came running, saw nothing. He searched the yard with a flashlight, yelled into the trees. Nothing. But I knew what I saw. After that, the knocking stopped for a week. We all tried to move on, convinced ourselves it had just been a dream, a deer, a prank. But I kept watching the woods. I couldn't help it. Something inside told me it wasn't over. And I was right. One night, I heard it again, but this time, it wasn't outside. It was inside. 3 knocks, soft, slow, on the wall between the living room and the hallway. I sat up in bed, frozen. My parents were asleep. The dog hadn't barked. I held my breath and waited. Then came footsteps, slow, dragging, as if someone was barefoot and uncertain. They passed my room. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, just listened. They stopped at my door. Then, knock, knock, knock. Not loud, not urgent, just intentional. I wanted to scream, but my throat had closed. I lay there, paralyzed, until morning light bled through the curtains. When I finally opened the door, no one was there, but there were muddy footprints on the hard wood, small, bare, leading from the hallway into the kitchen, and then gone, vanished. We called the police again. They checked the locks, the windows, the roof. Nothing. No signs of forced entry, no evidence. Just prints that didn't belong. My mother began sleeping with the lights on. My father stayed up longer each night, listening, but the knocking never came when he waited. Only after. Only when we were vulnerable. I stopped sleeping near the window. I stopped looking into the woods. But I never stopped hearing it. Those 3 soft knocks. Some nights they came from the ceiling, some from the floor. One night I heard them under my bed. That's when I snapped. I moved into the living room, slept on the couch with every lamp on. But even then, it didn't stop. The knocking always found me. It never broke down doors. It never screamed. It just knocked, like it was waiting to be invited in. Then, one night, it stopped, just like that. No warning, no goodbye. Weeks passed in silence. We started to breathe again, started to believe we were safe. My parents relaxed, my sister laughed more, but I didn't trust the quiet. I knew better. Silence was where it hid. Then, about a month later, I was walking home from school alone. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the gravel road. I passed a cluster of trees at the edge of the property when I heard it again, knock, 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 on a nearby tree. My blood turned to ice. I turned slowly, heart in my throat. There, deep in the shadows, was the shape again. Tall, crooked, watching. I didn't run. I couldn't. I just stared. It didn't move. Didn't speak. Just raised one arm again. Knock, knock, knock. Then it faded into the trees like smoke. I walked home in a daze, locked every door, and never spoke of it again. My family thinks it was over, that whatever haunted our home left, but I know better. I've heard it in other places, in other towns, once, even in the city. Always the same pattern, always from just beyond the reach of light. And I've come to believe it's not tied to the house. It's tied to me. And maybe, just maybe, it was never knocking to come in. Maybe it was knocking to let me know it already had. Story 5. the woods behind my childhood home. When I was a child, I lived in a small rural neighborhood tucked between two rolling hills and surrounded by miles of dense forest. It wasn't exactly a town, more of a cluster of houses off a long gravel road, far from gas stations, stores, or even decent cell service. Growing up out there was equal parts freedom and mystery. We rode bikes without supervision, climbed trees without fear, and stayed out until the stars blinked to life above us. But the woods, those deep, quiet woods behind my house, they always made me uneasy. During the day, they looked peaceful, green, and inviting. But once the sun dipped low and the shadows grew long, it felt like the trees were watching. And sometimes I'd hear things. Soft, cracking branches, whispering winds that didn't match the breeze. One summer, when I was around 9, I made friends with a boy who had just moved into the house 2 lots over. His name was Caleb. He was quiet, pale, and always seemed to be studying the woods. While the other kids played tag or built forts, Caleb would sit at the edge of the trees staring into the shadows. Eventually, I got curious and joined him. We spent a lot of time just sitting there, not saying much. Then one day, he told me that there was something living in the woods. Not an animal, not a person. Something else. He called it the Hollow Man. Said he saw it at night, tall and thin, with skin like tree bark and no face, just a dark, empty shape that melted into the shadows. I laughed at first, thought he was trying to scare me, but he didn't smile. He said the Hollow Man came close sometimes, stood behind trees and waited, always watching, never moving. He said it didn't like noise, that it only came when everything else was silent. I didn't know what to make of it. Part of me wanted to believe he was just lonely, making up stories. But that night, lying in bed, I kept thinking about it. I stared out my window at the tree line, the moon casting long bent shadows across the yard. And for a moment, just one, I thought I saw something shift, something taller than the fence, something standing still, not swaying like the branches around it. I didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, Caleb told me he saw it too, that it had come closer. I started avoiding the woods after that, but Caleb didn't. He spent more and more time there, even started leaving food near the edge, fruit, crackers, small bits of meat. He said it was an offering, that if you left something behind, the Hollow Man wouldn't come to your house. I told my parents. They just shrugged, said he was imaginative, but something about it felt wrong. Like Caleb was slipping away into something I couldn't follow. Then one day, he disappeared, just vanished. His mother called the police, and search parties went out for days. They combed through the woods, helicopters circling overhead, dogs barking into the silence. But they found nothing, not a single trace. Everyone said he probably ran away, that he was troubled, but I knew better. I had seen the way he stared into the woods, the way he listened for things no one else could hear. After he disappeared, I couldn't bring myself to go near the trees. I kept my curtains shut, slept with the lights on. I'd wake in the middle of the night sometimes, certain I'd heard 3 soft taps on the window, but no one ever believed me. Not really. Life went on. Seasons changed. We moved away when I was 11. I packed up my things, left the house behind, and tried not to think about Caleb or the Hollow Man. I told myself it was just a story, a game, nothing real. Years later, as an adult, I found myself driving through the area again. Just passing through, I pulled off onto the old road out of curiosity. Everything looked smaller than I remembered, but the woods, they hadn't changed. They were still tall, still dark, still whispering. I parked near the old house and walked to the tree line. My heart thudded in my chest. I half expected to see Khaled there, older, grinning, ready to tell me it was all just a trick, but there was nothing. Just silence. The air felt heavier there, like the world held its breath. I stood quietly, remembering the way the branches had sounded at night. And then, without warning, I heard it. 3 soft knocks from somewhere deeper in the trees. I didn't stay. I turned and walked back to the car, not running, not panicking, just moving with quiet certainty. I didn't need to look. I didn't want to know. I haven't been back since. But sometimes, in that space between waking and sleep, I dream of the woods. I see Caleb standing just past the first row of trees, hand raised, beckoning me forward. Behind him, the shadows ripple. Something tall moves between the trunks, watching, waiting. Then I wake up with my hands clenched and the sound of soft knocking still echoing in my ears. I don't tell anyone about those dreams. Not anymore. I just keep my windows closed and never, ever listen too closely when the night turns still. People ask me if I ever found out what happened to Caleb. The truth is, no one knows. The case was closed eventually, declared a runaway, but in the deepest part of me, I know that's not what happened. Something took him. Something older than the town, older than the trees, something that lives in silence and shadow. Maybe it's still there. Maybe it waits for people like Caleb, quiet ones, curious ones, and maybe, just maybe, it remembers the ones who walked away. That's why I never stop at the edge of the woods. That's why I never turn off the lights when I sleep. And that's why, even now, I still wake sometimes with the feeling that something is standing just outside, tapping gently on the glass. Story 6. The locked room in my uncle's house. When I was a child, we'd visit my uncle's house every summer. It sat alone on the edge of a small lake in northern Michigan, nestled between thickets of trees and whispering reeds. The house itself was old, creaky floors, faded wallpaper, the kind of place that always smelled faintly of cedar and dust, but it had a warmth to it, a charm. We'd spend weeks there, swimming in the lake, roasting marshmallows, and playing ball games on the screened porch while the sun dipped behind the trees. My uncle, a quiet man with large hands and a gentle voice, lived there alone. He had no children, no wife, and though he was kind, he never answered personal questions, especially about the room at the end of the upstairs hallway, the one that was always locked. That door fascinated me. It had no label, no markings, just a single brass handle and a keyhole so worn it looked smoothed by time itself. Every summer I asked about it. My uncle would always respond the same way, with a tight-lipped smile and a gentle shake of the head. "That room's not for guests," he'd say. And that was it. No explanation, no story, just silence. My cousins and I would make up theories. Treasure hidden behind the door, a ghost trapped inside, maybe even a secret passage to somewhere else. We never dared try the handle ourselves. Somehow, even as children, we knew the room was sacred, off limits, protected by unspoken rule that none of us were brave or foolish enough to break. But that changed when I was 15. That summer, my cousins couldn't make the trip and I was the only one visiting. The house felt quieter without them, more hollow. My uncle still cooked breakfast every morning, still smiled politely, but something was different. He seemed distracted, pale. He'd stare at the locked door for long stretches, unaware I was watching. One night, I heard movement upstairs, soft footsteps like someone pacing. I thought maybe he couldn't sleep. But when I got up to use the bathroom, I noticed something strange. A line of salt across the threshold of the locked room. I leaned down, touched it with my finger, and it crumbled like dry sand. That was the first time I felt fear in that house. The next morning I asked him about the salt. He dropped his coffee cup. It shattered on the kitchen floor. He didn't answer, just stared at me, wide-eyed, like I'd spoken a word he'd buried decades ago. That day, he left me at the house while he ran errands, told me not to go upstairs, told me to stay by the lake. Of course, I didn't listen. Curiosity is a louder voice than reason. I waited until his truck disappeared down the road and crept back inside. The house felt different, like it was holding its breath. I walked slowly up the stairs, each step creaking under my weight. When I reached the top, I stood before the locked door, heart pounding, and to my surprise it was open. Just slightly, as if someone had left in a hurry and forgotten to shut it all the way. I hesitated, hand hovering over the knob. Then, slowly, I pushed it open. The room was small, dusty. Light filtered through closed curtains, casting pale lines across the wooden floor. In the center was a rocking chair, empty, facing the window. Beside it, a small table with a cracked lamp and a faded book. But what drew my eye was the far wall. It was covered in photographs, hundreds of them, all of the same woman. Her face changed with age, but it was clearly her. In some she was laughing, in others she was crying, in several she was simply staring, eyes blank, face unreadable. I stepped closer. Every photo had a date scribbled in pencil. Some from decades ago, some recent, too recent. That's when I noticed the bed. Tucked in the corner, barely visible from the doorway, it was made up neatly, but the pillow was indented as if someone had just risen from it. The air smelled faintly of lavender and something metallic. I stood frozen. Then the door slammed shut behind me. I turned, heart racing, but no one was there. The handle wouldn't move. I was locked in. I banged on the door, called for help. Nothing. Then I heard it, the creaking of the rocking chair. Slow, rhythmic. I turned, and there she was, the woman from the photos, sitting, rocking, staring straight at me with eyes that didn't blink. She didn't speak, didn't move, just rocked. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, like the air had been squeezed from the room. Then she stood up, slowly, and took a step toward me. I backed against the wall, unable to look away. Her face was expressionless, not angry, not sad, just hollow, empty. Then she whispered something, so soft I almost didn't hear it. He said, "You wouldn't come in." I closed my eyes, bracing for something, anything. But when I opened them again, she was gone. The room was empty. The door swung open behind me. My uncle was standing there, his face pale, eyes glistening. "You shouldn't have," he said, and nothing more. He never let me return. After that summer, he stopped inviting family. He sold the house 2 years later and moved to Arizona. I never spoke of the woman again, not to him, not to anyone. But I see her sometimes, in dreams, in reflections, in photographs I didn't take. She never speaks again. She just rocks, just watches. And I've come to believe that room wasn't just a place. It was a boundary, a door between something we don't understand and something that knows us too well, something that waits and watches and remembers. Story 7, The Thief in the Apartment 3B. I used to live in a small apartment complex in Oregon. Nothing fancy, just 8 units on 2 floors, arranged in a straight line along a quiet street. I was in college at the time, juggling classes, work, and a part-time life that often felt more exhausting than full. My apartment was number 2B on the lower level, tucked right beneath the stairwell and across from 3B, which had been vacant for months. At least, that's what I was told. I never saw anyone go in or out. The blinds were always drawn. No lights, no sound. But something about that unit always made me uneasy. When I walked past it, I felt colder, as if a window had been left cracked, open in the dead of winter. Still, I tried to ignore it. I had enough going on without worrying about an empty apartment. Then, one evening around dusk, I came home to find the door to 3B cracked open. Not much, just an inch or two, but enough to see that the hallway light was on inside. I paused, confused. Maybe someone had finally moved in. I knocked gently on the frame, called out, "Hello?" No answer. I peered in a bit farther and saw that the walls were bare, the floor was spotless, and the air smelled faintly of bleach and something older, like damp wood and metal. I didn't step inside. Something held me back. I went home, locked my door, and figured I'd ask the landlord the next time I saw him. That night, however, something strange happened. I was woken around 2 a.m. by footsteps directly above my bed. It wasn't unusual to hear neighbours moving around, but these steps were different. Slow, steady, deliberate. They circled the ceiling once, then again. I held my breath. Then I heard something drag across the floor, like a chair or table being pulled. The footsteps stopped. Silence stretched out for several minutes. Then, from directly above me, came 3 soft knocks. I sat up, heart pounding. The pattern repeated. 3 knocks, followed by silence. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I approached the property manager and asked if someone had moved into 3B. He looked surprised and said, "No, still empty. No applications yet." I told him I heard footsteps. He shrugged, said the building was old. He makes sounds. That weekend, I invited a friend to stay over. I didn't tell her everything, just that I was feeling a little off lately. That night, as we were watching a movie, she paused it and looked up. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. I did. The footsteps were back. Again, slow, again overhead. She got up and looked toward the ceiling. Then we both heard it, the sound of someone whispering. Just faint enough to be unintelligible, but clearly there. She turned to me, her face pale. "Is someone living up there?" I told her no, not officially. She didn't stay the night, and honestly I didn't blame her. I started sleeping with the lights on after that, and every night, without fail, the knocks would come. Always 3, always at the same time. A week later, I finally worked up the nerve to go upstairs. I waited until midday, when everything felt less threatening, and climbed the steps to 3B. I knocked. No response. I put my ear to the door and heard nothing. I turned the knob. It was locked this time. I bent down and peered through the keyhole, expecting darkness. But I saw light. A dull yellow glow like a candle flickering far inside. Then for just a second, I saw movement, something shifting across the light. A shape, a shadow. I stood quickly, heart racing. As I backed away, I heard a click from the other side like someone had just locked the door again. I left in a hurry and didn't return. That night, the knocks changed. They were louder, faster, more aggressive. Then came the whispers, clearer this time. A voice repeating something over and over. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like a question, and I got the sense that whoever or whatever was in 3B was waiting for an answer. They called the landlord again. This time, I insisted he check the unit. He agreed, sounding annoyed. The next day he called me back and said, "You're not going to believe this." He found the apartment completely empty. No furniture, no light fixtures, not even curtains. But in the center of the living room, drawn carefully in chalk, was a large symbol neither of us recognized. And around it, burned into the wood floor, were 3 charred handprints. After that, Things got worse. My dreams became violent. Always the same figure standing at the foot of my bed, reaching out with blackened fingers. I saw movement in mirrors. I heard breathing behind me when I was alone. I tried to move out, but everything fell through. Applications denied, payments lost, delays I couldn't explain. It was like something wanted me to stay. I stopped going to class. I stopped seeing friends. I barely ate. The knocks continued every night, 3 at a time, never more, never less, until one night they stopped. Just like that. The silence was worse. It was heavy, suffocating, and in that stillness, I heard the lock on my front door turn, slowly, from the inside. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The door didn't open, but I knew then that whatever had been in 3B was no longer confined to the floor above. It had come down. It had followed me. I moved out the next morning with whatever I could carry. I never went back. I don't know what happened to the building. I don't want to know. I spent years trying to forget the feeling of that presence, the smell of that air, and to the weight of that silence. But sometimes, when I'm alone in my new apartment, I still wake at 2 a.m. and I lie there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sound of footsteps. And then, faint, distant, I hear them, not above me, not beside me, but inside the walls. Story 8. The Man in the Backyard. It was the summer after I graduated college, and I had just moved back home while job hunting. My parents' house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac in a sleepy suburb, the kind of place where the loudest sound at night was the chirp of crickets or the occasional bark of a neighbour's dog. It was peaceful, familiar. I spent most of my nights in the upstairs bedroom, the same one I had as a teenager, scrolling through job listings and watching late-night movies. The backyard stretched out just beyond my window, a wide patch of grass framed by a wooden fence and a dense tree line at the very back. I used to love watching the moon rise over those trees. But one night, that calm would be shattered by something I still don't fully understand. It began with movement, a flicker of something near the fence line. I was watching a show, half asleep, when I noticed it out of the corner of my eye. Just a shadow, I thought, maybe a raccoon. But then it happened again, slower, more deliberate. I turned off the screen and peered out the window. The moon was full, casting pale light across the yard, and there, standing at the edge of the trees, was a man, still, upright, watching the house. My breath caught in my throat. He didn't move, didn't pace or shift, just stood there, like he'd always been there, and I'd only now noticed. He was tall, thin, dressed in dark clothes that blended with the night. I couldn't see his face. I watched for 10 minutes, frozen. Then I left my room, crept downstairs, and locked the back door, even though I was certain it already was. I told myself it was nothing, just a guy passing through, but something felt wrong. The next night, he was there again. Same spot, same posture, like a statue carved from shadow. I told my dad. He came out to check, walked the backyard with a flashlight, scanned the fence line. Nothing. No footprints, no broken boards. But I knew what I'd seen, and the feeling hadn't gone away. That night, I stayed awake, peeking through the blinds. At 3:17 a.m., he appeared again, this time closer to the house. I saw his head tilt up, toward my window, as if he knew I was watching. For the next few nights, the routine repeated. He'd vanish during the day, only to return after midnight, standing in a new spot each time, closer and closer. I stopped sleeping. My parents didn't see him. My friends thought I was dreaming. But I started noticing other things. The porch light flickering, the back gate swinging open even though we always latched it. My dog, growling at corners of the house like something was inside. Then one night, I woke up to find muddy footprints on the deck, bare footprints, long and narrow, leading from the grass to the back door. I showed my parents. They blamed neighborhood kids, said someone was messing around, but their voices didn't sound convinced. They were scared too. They just didn't want to admit it. I started sleeping in the living room with the blinds drawn. I couldn't bear to look out the window anymore, but that didn't help. Around 2 a.m., the motion light in the yard would turn on. Every time I got the courage to check, it would be off again. Nothing there. Then came the tapping. 3 soft knocks on the glass, barely audible, like a finger rather than a fist. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just listened. Eventually it stopped. But I knew what it meant. He wasn't just in the yard anymore. He was at the house, close enough to touch the windows, close enough to hear me breathe. One morning, I went outside and found a single item placed on the porch. A dead crow. Wings spread, eyes still open. I called the police. They did a quick search, said they couldn't do much without video or an actual break-in. Probably a prank, they said, someone trying to scare you. I bought a security camera and pointed it at the backyard. That night, I waited. The motion light came on. The camera triggered. I didn't check it until morning. When I did, my blood ran cold. The footage showed nothing at first, just the still yard. Then, at 3:17 a.m. exactly, static, just for 10 seconds. When the feed returned, the yard was empty. No man, no light. But something had disrupted the recording. I checked the timestamp. Every night, the camera glitched at the same minute. Always 3:17. I moved out a week later. Took the first job I could get in another state. My parents said they hadn't seen anything since. That the yard was quiet now. But I don't believe it. Sometimes, I wake up in my new apartment to find the blinds slightly parted, or the porch light turned on, even when I'm sure I left it off. Once, I found a smear of dirt on the window outside my bedroom, like a handprint dragged slowly down the glass. And every time I check the clock, it's always the same, 3:17. I am. I've changed addresses, changed locks, changed routines, but I don't think it matters, because some things don't need doors to follow you. Some things just need your attention, your awareness, and once you see them, really see them, they don't forget you. I still don't know who the man in the backyard was. I don't know what he wanted, or how he got so close without leaving a trace. But I know he's still out there, watching, waiting, and I know he'll come back. Because I looked out the window, and now I can't unsee him. Story 9. The night shift at the isolated gas station. My early 20s. I worked the night shift at a gas station just off a nearly forgotten stretch of highway in the Pacific Northwest. It was the kind of place travelers only stumbled into when their GPS lost signal and their tank dipped too close to empty. The road leading there was 2 lanes, surrounded on both sides by thick woods that always seemed to press a little closer at night. The station itself was simple. 2 pumps, 1 small convenience store, a flickering street lamp overhead. I didn't mind the quiet. I was saving up, trying to stay out of debt, and the solitude helped me think. Most nights, nothing happened. A few cars. The occasional drunk trying to haggle over gas prices. But one night changed everything. It was late October. The air had that sharpness that comes just before the first snow, and the wind howled through the trees like something alive. I was inside, stocking shelves, when I heard the bell above the door chime. I turned to greet the customer, but the store was empty. I stepped out front, thinking maybe someone had walked in and turned around. But there was no car at the pumps, no headlights on the road, just me, the empty highway, and the wind. I walked back in, confused but not frightened. Sometimes the wind blew the door just enough to trigger the chime. That's what I told myself. That's what I needed to believe. Until it happened again. This time with footsteps, mixing with the rest of the world. I was behind the counter, eyes glued to the small black and white monitor that showed the outside camera. A shape moved past the pump. Tall, thin, almost gliding. I jumped up, grabbed the flashlight and stepped outside. No one there. But the motion sensor above pump 2 was still lit, buzzing faintly. I walked around the station, checked the lot. Nothing, not a sound, not even an echo. I went back in, locked the door, and tried to shake it off. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe I needed to drink less coffee. But then the knocking started. 3 sharp raps against the back door, the one we never used. I froze. No one ever came from the back. It opened into the woods and we kept it locked at all times. I grabbed the key from beneath the register, my hands shaking. I stepped carefully through the storeroom and pressed my ear to the door. Silence. Then, just as I was about to walk away, 3 more knocks. Loud, deliberate. I backed up, heart racing, and flipped off the storeroom light. I didn't open the door. I couldn't. I turned on every light inside, locked myself in behind the counter, and waited. Hours passed. The sun began to rise. The knocks didn't return. I closed up shop that morning without looking back, convinced it was just a prank. Until the next night. I considered calling in sick, but I needed the hours. So I returned, flashlight in hand, pepper spray in my pocket. Everything seemed normal until around 1:30 a.m. That's when the power cut out. No storm, no wind, just a sudden, absolute blackout. The emergency lights clicked on. I checked the fuse box. Everything was fine. Still, the power wouldn't return. And then, in the faint red glow of the backup lighting, I saw movement on the monitor again. The figure was standing at the edge of the lot, just past the pumps. Still. Watching. Too far for detail, but close enough to feel the weight of its presence. I didn't go outside this time. I couldn't. Instead, I hid in the bathroom, door locked, heart racing. I don't know how long I sat there. At some point, I must have fallen asleep. When I woke up, the power was back, the lights were on, and the clock read 5:47. I opened the bathroom door slowly, expecting chaos. But the store looked untouched. Everything was in place. Except for one thing. On the counter where I usually kept the receipts, someone had left a Polaroid photo. It showed the back of the gas station, and standing by the door, the one that led into the woods, was me, frozen, mouth open, as if I had just heard a sound behind me. I dropped the photo, ran out the door, and didn't stop until I hit the main road. I quit that same day, told the manager I couldn't work nights anymore. I didn't explain, just packed up my locker and left. I moved 2 towns over and took a job at a bookstore. Quiet, safe, but the memory didn't fade. I kept the photo, tucked deep in a box of things I swore I'd never look at again. Still, I think about it often. Who took it? How did they get inside without triggering the alarm? And how did they vanish without leaving a single footprint? Sometimes I wake in the middle of the night and swear I hear knocking. Faint, far away, and always in threes. I haven't been back to that gas station since. I don't know if it's still open. I don't know if anyone else has seen the figure, the lights, or found the photo. But I do know this. Some places carry things in their shadows. Things that watch, that wait, that knock not to be let in, but to remind you they already were. I try not to think about what would have happened if I'd opened the back door, or if I had stayed one more night. But every so often, I dream of that moment frozen in the Polaroid. Me, standing with my back to the trees, and something just out of frame, reaching forward.